now. So we have had this show going for a little while. My name's Jimmy Moore. Pretty much talk about anything and everything as it relates to whatever interests me. So that's the beauty of this show. I'm well known in the nutritional health world for talking about ketogenic diets and low carb diets, cholesterol, fasting, and all the things. But on this show, we talk about whatever I want to talk about. And it just so happens today's topic was suggested to me by somebody that just popped into the live here, the Fat Fueled Girl. Go follow her, you guys. She is amazing. Janae, thank you so much for inspiring today's show. I have a study in my grubby hands today, you guys, because of that young lady right there. She is a student and very nerdy, looking at science all the time. And she saw this study and got all excited, shared about it on her page. And so as soon as I saw the title, I was like, oh, I'm so ranting about that on Jimmy Rants. And so here we are today talking about the dark side of the spoon, glucose, ketones, and COVID-19, a possible role for the ketogenic diet. Now, you will notice in the little notes that I put there for the show how I did the virus. You'll get a kick out of this. I'm gonna pin it for you so you can see. I'm gonna give props to Ryan Lowry. If you don't follow Dr. Ryan Lowry and his work, he's been calling this thing DIVOC. So I did a little play on DIVOC by calling it 9-1 DIVOC. So we're going to talk about 9-1 DIVOC and how a ketogenic diet may be a possible help, at least as a therapeutic, in dealing with that. So I got a whole study about this. And you might remember a couple months ago, there was a study that came out extremely technical. I mean, your boy Jimmy was having trouble pronouncing some of the words, and it was pretty in-depth. It was fascinating as all get out, but it was really, and talking about kind of the mechanism of how ketones could help in dealing with DIVOC. And so today's study is a little less convoluted, a little more the Journal of Translational Medicine, and it was published just last month in that journal. So we're going to go over the entire thing. And as I usually do here on the show, I'm going to read it, but then give running commentary along the way, any thoughts that come to mind. And definitely I'm interested in your thoughts. So go ahead and as I'm reading and things come to mind, go ahead and interact with the show. All right, so let's get going. Let's look at the abstract first. The novel coronavirus disease COVID-19 is posing a serious challenge to the healthcare systems worldwide, with an enormous impact on health condition and the loss of lives. Notably, obesity and its related comorbidities are strictly related with worse clinical outcomes from this disease. Recently, there is a growing interest in the clinical use of ketogenic diets, particularly in the context of severe obesity with related metabolic complications. So it seems that one of the roles that it could play in 9-1 DIVOC, and stay with me there when I do that, you know what I'm talking about. One of the roles it plays is the major comorbidity that they're seeing in a lot of people that are dying from this thing is obesity. And so if you can deal with the obesity, then by extension from that, you make people less likely to have complications from and ultimately dying from 9-1 DIVOC. And so that makes sense. Ketogenic diets, very well known to help with fat loss. And so that is one of the things I know that they're going to look at mechanistically, why a ketogenic diet could have a possible role in this. Ketogenic diets have been proven effective for rapid reduction of fat mass, preserving lean mass, and providing an adequate nutritional status. In particular, the physiological increase in plasma levels, that's blood, of ketone bodies exerts important anti-inflammatory and immunomodulating effects, and that's key. I often tell people the reason why a ketogenic diet works for fat loss primarily is it lowers inflammation, because if you don't have inflammation going on, at least at an extremely high level, it makes sense that the body wouldn't feel the need to hang on to so much body fat, and thus it releases body fat. So that's a key. And then the whole immunomodulating effects. This is a benefit of the ketogenic diet that I don't think it's talked about nearly enough. Immunomodulation is huge. And you think about like periods of fasting that happen naturally when you go on a ketogenic diet. That's also playing a role in this. Let's not think that it's just the ketones, but it's also what those ketones are doing to keep you sated, so you don't feel like you have to eat so often, so that you're not tempted to eat things that may make you more immunocompromised, more inflammatory. All of it kind of plays hand in hand with eating keto. It may reveal as precious tools to prevent infection and potential adverse outcomes from this 9-1 DIVOC disease. We discuss here the importance of ketogenic diets for rapid reduction of several critical risk factors for this, such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, and hypertension, that's high blood pressure, based on the known effects of ketone bodies on inflammation, immunity, metabolic profile, and cardiovascular function. I love that the researchers here, and let me give them a shout out, and I'm going to slaughter their names because it looks like are they Italian? I'm trying to see where they're from. But these researchers from Italy, Department of Biomedical Sciences at the University of Padua, Italy, Antonio Paoli, Stefania Gorini, and I love this one, Massimiliano Caprio. That's definitely a very Italian name, but they definitely understand that the ketogenic diet is something that's powerful as it relates to your metabolism, as it relates to all the effects that it does. Can you imagine if we had those kinds of researchers here in America willing to do these kinds of experiments? And let me give a shout out to a few of them. We do. Dr. Dominique D'Agostino, huge looking at this down in Tampa. You've got Dr. Jeff Volek at The Ohio State University. Dr. Eric Westman doesn't do active research nearly as much as he used to, but he's in Durham, North Carolina. And same with Dr. Steve Finney. He doesn't really conduct research anymore, but he's definitely out there as a voice, but it's few and far between. It's a shame that a lot of the studies that are positive about a ketogenic diet that I talk about on this show come from foreign countries, Australia, New Zealand, even China, and then this one's from Italy. We do believe that a rapid reduction of all of the modifiable risk factors, especially obesity with its metabolic complications, should be a pillar of public health policies and interventions in view of future waves of this SARS-CoV-2 infection. So that's the abstract. Let's get into the paper itself. And this is going to be very familiar for those of you that follow my work. I've talked very extensively about a lot of these benefits that come from eating a ketogenic diet. And if you've been kind of teetering on this, maybe this year has been really tough on you and you've kind of let your keto slip, maybe this will knock you back on course again to see that perhaps that ketogenic diet is giving you more benefit than you think it is with 9-1 DIVOC. And if you're just joining us, yes, 9-1 DIVOC, just flip it backwards and you know what I'm talking about. We have a brand new study. Thanks to the Fat Fuel Girl. She sent this to me, Janae. Thank you for that. And I'm going to go over this all about how the ketogenic diet could be playing a possible role in helping with 9-1 DIVOC. Flip it around backwards and you're right there with me. All right, let's get into the episode. Introduction. Data from the World Health Organization indicates that seasonal influenza causes about 3 to 5 million cases of severe illness, 290,000 to 650,000 deaths from respiratory causes, 99,000 to 200,000 deaths from lower respiratory tract infections. In general, acute respiratory infections are one of the leading causes of morbidity around the world, and more specifically, lower respiratory tract infections are the leading infectious cause of death and 5th leading cause of death overall, which is why they're not really reporting this year a lot of the seasonal the seasonal flu type of numbers. And that's concerning because now they're going to try to allocate a lot of those illnesses and the things that they just talked about, the severe illness, 3 to 5 million cases. And how many cases have we heard of people with symptoms and asymptomatic? Most of the cases you hear about 9-1 DIVOC are asymptomatic. What they say, upwards of 80% of the ones that have been reported have been asymptomatic. And even in that 20%, you're not seeing anything that's out of the ordinary compared to what they're seeing with seasonal influenza around the world. But if they're not going to be reporting seasonal influenza, as the CDC has chosen not to do for this year, then you're left with no other choice but to think they're allocating some of those seasonal flu illnesses and then eventual maybe deaths to 9-1 DIVOC. Anybody else concerned about that? Is that not like a little bit fishy? But that's straight numbers from the World Health Organization. In consideration of the relative low effectiveness of a vaccine for influenza, public health practices have been implemented by health authorities in order to limit the spread of these respiratory viruses. Did you catch that? In consideration of the relatively low effectiveness of the influenza vaccination. And those are ones that were developed over a very long time. And yet we still have the seasonal flu. We still have 3 to 5 million cases of people get severe illness from the seasonal flu. Upwards of 650,000 from respiratory causes, 200,000 from lower respiratory infections. And yet they want to push us to take a V word for 9-1 DIVOC. Anybody feeling great about that? All right, I'll leave that alone for now. Common suggested health practices are related to people's behaviors, things like hand washing, use of masks, eye protection, social distancing, and were encouraged all throughout this 9-1 DIVOC pandemic caused by a virus for which there is not yet a V word. We're about to have one. This was published last month. So at that time, we had not gotten the Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca V words in yet. I hear that by the end of December is when we're supposed to have the Pfizer version of it available for those who, I guess, want it. Nor effective pharmacological treatment so far. Well, that's not true either, because we've been seeing, and I talked about this yesterday, we have a lot of therapeutics that have been wonderful. Resdemisphere, I talked about that on previous Jimmy Rants, hydroxychloroquine, and obviously vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D. In fact, just before I came on the air, I took 25,000 IU of vitamin D3K2. It's like a combo supplement. And I've been doing pretty high dose vitamin D from the beginning of this in March. The only time I titrated it back was during the summer when there was a lot of sunshine and I got out in the sun and allowed it to hit my skin and produced it naturally. But this time of year when we have less sun and it's cold outside, I do tend to boost it. And so I've been doing about 25 to 30,000 IU of vitamin D3. And my version has coconut oil as the fat of choice because it's a fat soluble vitamin D. You want to make sure you're eating fat with it. That's just a sidebar. I get mine on Amazon, by the way, if you want to get it. All right, so let's get into the risk factors for 9-1 DIVOC, a role of lifestyle behaviors. Despite the fact the current mortality rate is 2.3%, the emergence of a large number of infected patients within a short period of time determined relevant difficulties in healthcare system of several countries with an enormous loss of lives. Among the risk factors for this, numerous studies identified a specific association is 75. So if you're over the age of 75 and you have various comorbidities, you're not going to do well with this thing. That's what we've learned so far. They also had the presence of many comorbidities, things like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and chronic kidney disease. Some of these diseases are related to their lifestyle behavior. Thus, it should be mandatory to act on all the aforementioned risk factors to improve patient outcomes and to reduce health's impact of possible future new outbreaks. This is the thing, guys. Not one single time have we heard from the voices on high for us to eat real food, take those vitamins I mentioned earlier, get sunshine, exercise, meditate, all the things. We have not heard anybody talk about any of that stuff. Why? How simple would it be, just in the same breath that they talk about wear a mask, socially distance, blah, 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 to add those things into the list of things people can do? Because, oh my gosh, we got the second wave for the 12th time. Well, guess what? 12 times ago, you could have told us that we could be doing all these things, but you didn't. And so now we're left with trying to pick up the pieces on our own. And individuals are definitely doing this, but don't you want to reach the masses and get them to be on board with trying to be as healthy as possible? Of course you are. Well, you would think they would be about that. It is worth mentioning that also the increase of sedentary behavior happened during the lockdown, led to a negative impact on general health condition, which is true. Again, that's something they could have thrown into the omnibus of all of these things they suggested, but they didn't. They didn't say wiggle your body a little bit. They just said go buy all the toilet paper, live in fear, and that fear, which leads to stress, doesn't really do anything good for your body. Gee, imagine that increases inflammation. It weakens your immune system. Like, are you following the trend here? All the things they told us to do have pretty much not really benefited people. And then, yeah, they've been sedentary. They're not only sedentary, but in that sedentary state, they're eating a bunch of junk food. And therefore, they've gotten fatter. They've gotten unhealthier because nobody has told them how to handle the ramifications of what they've had us do. The sedentarism due to shelter-in-place policy enforced in several countries during this 9/1 DIVOC pandemic displayed deleterious effects on skeletal muscle metabolism, including things like insulin resistance, fat deposition, and low-grade systemic inflammation, with an overall worsening of all the metabolic parameters, glucose control, and inflammation status. Well, what did they expect? If you keep people in fear, you don't give them instruction about how to handle that stress from that fear. You don't give them any kind of relief because there's no end in sight to what's happening. You're not giving them any instructions on, hey, if you eat these things, you're going to be in a better health place, or if you take these supplements, or if you do this movement pattern, or if you get out in the sun, go get breath of fresh air. None of that has happened. So why are we surprised? Why do they pretend like, oh my gosh, we don't know why people are getting sick and going to the hospital and some of them are unfortunately dying? We don't know why. Really? Do you guys really believe they don't know why? We all know why. We don't need to have this explained to us. But unfortunately, some people do. In this regard, sarcopenic obesity, characterized by the coexistence of excessive adiposity and a low muscle mass, is strongly associated with an increased cardiovascular risk, insulin resistance, and low-grade inflammation. Therefore, it represents, together with inadequacy of nutritional status, a condition associated with an increased susceptibility to viral infection. Yeah. When you lower people's immune systems, guess what? You're more susceptible. If 9/1 DIVOC decides to rear its ugly head in your life and it gets past all the first parts of your immune system, which is your outer skin, it gets past that, and your T cells don't really respond the way you need them to take care of it, and it gets deep down in there, you might be in trouble if you're compromised. And so, yeah, that's where we are. That's why this issue we're talking about here today is so important. Importantly, critically ill 9/1 DIVOC patients with obesity and malnutrition show worse outcomes than obese patients without malnutrition. So that's important. Malnutrition means that you're eating inferior food. This is why eat real Food should have been one of the first things that we heard out of the mouths of the leaders in this so-called pandemic. Eat real food. How hard would it have been? I know the temptation is you're very upset because of all the things happening right now in the world, but please avoid the junk food and please go eat as much real food as you possibly can. And how hard would that have been? Not hard at all. I don't want to sound jaded, but it's almost like the junk food companies said, don't you dare say anything about junk food and switching to real food. Don't do it. Don't do it. And there was financial interest. I don't have any evidence to back that up. That's just this is Jimmy Rants. I rant and I tell you my opinions and you can take with it what you want. But that's my thinking, that something happened where they didn't want that message to get out there. But a little bit of a tangent here. Let's not pretend like they've been raw, real food before all this went down. No. They didn't. They've always been kind of blah when it comes to talking about eat real food. Why? Because there's special interest involved. Janae says, but no, they are shutting down high quality restaurants and they keep McDonald's open. That's exactly right, Janae. That's the problem. And we could get off, and I need to do a whole Jimmy Rants about what they deem essential, Costco, Walmart, on down the line, versus non-essential, churches, and other small businesses. Yeah, I definitely need to do a whole rant just on that one, but that's for another day. Let's get back to this. And if you joined us late, yes, there is a brand new study that I am reading from that it suggests a possible role for the ketogenic diet for 9-1 DIVOC. Just reverse that around and you know what I'm talking about. It's published in the Journal of Translational Medicine, came out in November of 2020, The Dark Side of the Spoon, Glucose, Ketones, and 9-1 DIVOC, a possible role for the ketogenic diet. So let's get back to the paper itself. During the lockdown, lifestyle and eating habits of a great part of the worldwide population have dramatically changed. The most important nutritional advice was to reduce the consumption of junk food and to prefer food items with antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties with the potential to positively affect the immune system. And this is the thing. It would have been so easy for them to say, you know what? We're all going to get 9-1 DIVOC. We're just all going to get it. We're not running from it. We know eventually everybody on the planet is going to be exposed to 9-1 DIVOC. And so since that's going to happen, why don't you work on your own personal vessel in the meantime? Take high dose vitamin D, take vitamin C, take zinc. Get out and get breath of fresh air. Get movement, even if it's just walking around your neighborhood, getting breath of fresh air, get sunshine. Try to do deep breathing exercises and meditation to relax. All the things that would improve the vessel of each individual person. How hard would that have been for them to say that on high? But no, they were dead silent about all that. And people started freaking out. What do you do when you freak out and you live in fear? Because they've kept us in fear. If you watch the media, I don't. I cut off my TV, by the way, a month ago. I literally cut off the service. I don't want to look at it. I haven't looked at it really all year. So I was paying for something I wasn't even using. I disconnected it completely. It's gone. I don't even look at it. Most of the news that I keep up with, I look at online, but I do it in chunks. I don't allow myself to just be mesmerized for hours looking at it and living in fear. I don't live in fear. But like, how many people are in that feeling of despair, and what are they doing? They're going to the number one drug in the entire world right now, and that's processed carbohydrates. And they're unabashed about stuffing their mouths with gobs and gobs and gobs of it, because that's how you are taught to deal with it, sadly. It is known that unhealthy nutritional habits that are rich in fat and carbohydrates are associated with obesity and sleep disturbance. I would only amend that statement to say it is known that unhealthy nutritional habits rich in bad fats, like vegetable oils and carbohydrates. This is why I don't like it when they lump fats and carbohydrates in the same sentence. Saturated fat in the absence of carbohydrate is a far different beast than saturated fat or any kind of fat in the presence of refined carbohydrates. But vegetable oil fats with processed carbohydrates, you're naming the junk food company. Go to any grocery store, randomly pick up any junk food, and the fat that's in there is most likely going to be some kind of seed oil. Look at it. So not only are you getting the inflammation and immunosuppressing effects of the refined carbohydrates, you're also getting those exact same effects from the crappy refined oils that they're putting in this. So don't let that line throw you off. But it does. It can increase your obesity, obviously, but it also could lead to sleep disturbance. Now, I wear a ring called the Oura ring, and it lets me track my sleep. And I aim to get at least 3 hours of some kind of restorative sleep a night. So that's deep sleep and or REM sleep. So the REM, the rapid eye movements where you dream, the deep sleeps where your body's really in recovery. I post it every day on my Instagram page over at Living Low Carb Man, but go check it out. Today I had 2 hours each, over 2 hours each of both REM and deep sleep. And so that's something that eating better can help with as well. And then by extension of that, the sleep actually helps lower inflammation, boost your energy, lower cortisol levels, which then has a great immuno-boosting effect as well. Importantly, a marked decrease in your sleep quality and an associated increase in body mass index has been described during the quarantine. So a lot of people have been dealing with this. Eat more junk food, get fatter, less sleep, and guess what? It becomes a revolving circle, because when you get less sleep, what happens? You want to eat more the next day. So then you eat more, and not only do you eat more, but you eat more of the bad stuff, and then you eat the bad stuff, which then disturbs your sleep again the next night, which then you see it's like this revolving door of not being able to get out of it. And this is why people have struggled this year. If you gained weight this year, don't beat yourself up. We all did. We all did. But at the end of the day, you know what to do. If you follow my work, you definitely know what to do. Definitely pick up a copy and get back to the basics of keto or whatever your chosen plan is. But get back to the basics and just start over again. And if you're not losing weight, it's no big deal. The fact is that you're not eating junk food. You're doing more to help lower inflammation, keep it at bay, improve your immune system, so that if and when 9-1 DIVOC decides to rear its ugly head at you, you'll be ready. You'll go all Chuck Norris on that bad boy. Okay, that was a bad Chuck Norris. Sorry, Chuck. See, I could go into Chuck Norris jokes at this point, but I think I'll keep going. Moreover, we've had a decrease in the amount of physical activity during quarantine that has affected significantly population's general health. So if you've let your exercise habit slip, it's easy. And it's easy to justify it in your mind. Well, this has been a rough year, and so I deserve to not have to work so hard. Okay, you might, but in your mind, you've convinced yourself of that. But why not take it the other direction and realize that when you exercise, you actually feel better. You get endorphin release and you get all the benefits, which boost your immunity, which should give you peace of mind that even when 9-1 DIVOC hits you, you're going to be okay. And I think that's the take home when it comes to movement. Therefore, there is the real risk that a higher number of patients with obesity and poor blood glucose control will be exposed to novel waves of this infection. And that's key. Let me make one point, a sidebar point here. This SARS-CoV-2 is not the last time we're going to get this kind of thing to come along. Don't you want to be ready for the next one, even when it hits? I think you do. And I think in general, you want your body to be in some kind of an optimal state. Now, you may not be there now, but you can do proactive activities right this moment so that even when that next one hits, you're ready. You're ready. So obesity and hyperglycemia, that's high blood sugar, the two villains on the COVID-19 stage. Oops, I said it. I'm so worried that YouTube and their analytics are going to like put that warning label on this video. And it's so obnoxious when you go to something and fact checkers say that there's information in here about 9-1 DIVOC. And so therefore, here's a link to the CDC website. Ugh. Yeah. So I'm trying to avoid that. Obesity represents one of the recognized prognostic factors for requirement of intensive care and high risk of death during the SARS-CoV-2 infection. And that's true. They said that early on that, well, if you've got obesity, you're at great risk. And I remember hearing that thinking, okay, is it the obesity or is it the obesity-related diseases that go along with it? Now, most people who have obesity have these comorbidities that go along with the obesity. And so therefore it makes sense to, well, it's the obesity. But what about people who have obesity, adipose tissue on their body, but they don't have comorbidities? They don't have out of control numbers in all these comorbidities. Are those people still at risk? I don't think so. Hypo or hyper? It's hyperglycemia. Did I say hypo? I'm sorry if I did, but hyperglycemia, along with obesity, the two villains on the 9-1 DIVOC stage. But yeah, obesity alone, I don't think is the big factor, but it's obesity with all of these other comorbidities that are related to the obesity that I think are the problem. In keeping with this, an important shift of severe 9-1 DIVOC disease to younger age has been clearly documented with obesity. So again, if you're younger and you've got obesity, I don't think it's just the obesity. It's these comorbidities. So if you have high blood pressure, if you have high triglycerides, if you have high inflammation levels, if you have a lot of things on the list of the comorbidities and you have type 2 diabetes, you have other issues going on, then yes, autoimmune, those things would put you more at risk. I don't think it's the obesity. They love to just throw the obesity in there. And that's a shame. Now, again, most people with obesity do have the comorbidity. So I see how they're trying to streamline it and call it obesity. But there are metabolically healthy people that have obesity. It's possible. I remember a few years ago, Dr. Barry Sears from the Zone Diet fame, he was helping the world's fattest man be able to lose weight. And it was a guy from Mexico, Manuel Uribe was his name. He weighed 1,270 pounds. And Dr. Sears put him on his diet, which was significantly less in carbohydrate. He was losing weight pretty rapidly. He lost about 200 pounds within about the first 6 months, and a significant amount of weight in 6 months. And Dr. Sears was all over television, and he's like, oh yeah, Manuel Uribe still weighs over 1,000 pounds, but he's metabolically healthy in his health markers. So even though he still had huge gargantuan morbid obesity, he was already metabolically healthy because of the choices that he was making. And that's what I'm saying about this, that we could be changing the narrative, even with people that still have obesity in the midst of changing. We're going to change the narrative that it's not about obesity, but about putting the vessel and making it as healthy as possible. And that's where we are. Obesity affects several critical functions, characterizing an increased vulnerability towards 9-1 DIVOC adverse outcomes. Obesity state restricts ventilation by disrupting diaphragm excursion, alters immune responses to viral infections, determines a chronic low-grade inflammation, and worsens glucose tolerance and oxidative stress with adverse effects on cardiovascular function. So these are all things that are related to the obesity that could make and exacerbate even when you get 9-1 DIVOC. Importantly, obese patients experience a more severe 9-1 DIVOC syndrome, since obesity is characterized by altered hemostatic balance with increased coagulation and defective fibrinolysis, which results in a prothrombotic state. It just means that you're not in a great physical condition even when this thing hits. And so therefore, it's better to try to deal with the obesity sooner than later. Furthermore, the coexistence of obesity and metabolic associated fatty liver disease determines an approximately 6-fold increased risk of severe outcome from 9-1 DIVOC, independently of age, sex, smoking, diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia. So they're saying there that when you have the comorbidities, that's going to increase your risk of a severe outcome by 6 times someone that does not have obesity and the metabolic disease. Notably, a recent report showed that adipose tissue expresses very high levels of transcripts for ACE2, ACE2. We talked about that early in the year about ACE2. It's an enzyme attached to the outer surface of the pneumocytes, which is used by coronaviruses to enter and infect the cells, raising the question whether adipose tissue may represent a reservoir for SARS-CoV-2 to go stay in, and a strategical site to amplify the cytokines cascade triggered by a viral infection. So if you've got more adipose tissue, the theory is that it basically, like a Trojan horse, SARS-CoV-2 gets into those fat cells, lies in wait, waiting, and then bam, the cytokine storm hits, and then the body has to go into overdrive trying to deal with this infection. The global epidemic of COVID-19 has determined important implications on the therapy of common metabolic disorders, things like type 2 diabetes, since 2 coronavirus receptor proteins, DPP4 and ACE2, are well-established transducers of metabolic signals controlling glucose homeostasis, together with other pathways involved in the regulation of cardiovascular physiology, inflammation, and renal activity. That's your kidneys. Glucose-lowering agents like DPP4 inhibitors, widely used in type 2 diabetes therapy, can modify the biological activity of multiple immunomodulatory substrates. So if you know you're in that category, perhaps these DPP4 inhibitors could be helpful. Again, everything is on the table in dealing with this. ACE2 is the entry receptor recognized by the spike proteins that come from SARS-CoV-2 and is known to be expressed in several different tissues, including the lungs, the kidney tubules, the heart, the luminal surface of the small intestine, adipose tissue, and the blood vessels themselves. Urinary ACE2 protein concentration and its enzymatic activity are increased in subjects with both type 1 diabetes as well as type 2. Whether hyperglycemia can regulate ACE2 expression in human tissues has not been sufficiently established yet, but it is known that in mouse models of diabetes, ACE2 is overexpressed in the lung, kidneys, and hearts. Therefore, getting that expression down is critical. In addition, several medications for the treatment of hypertension, such as ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers, are known to upregulate ACE2 expression. Thus, due to increased ACE2 receptor expression in multiple tissues of diabetic patients, it has been argued that the severity of 9-1 DIVOC might potentially be exacerbated. Nevertheless, in consideration of well-established organ protective effects of renin-angio RAAS inhibitors, I don't want to go all technical on you, but that's in there. Several authoritative scientific societies recommended against the discontinuation of these drugs in patients who are at high risk for 9-1 DIVOC. However, the possibility to avoid or potentially harmful pharmacological therapies with a lifestyle intervention should be carefully taken into consideration. Why isn't that taken into consideration anyway? Why do we have to, with these guys, why do we have to assume that it's only the very sickest people that need to be worried about that? Why aren't we kind of encouraging that with everybody? Lifestyle modification seems like a well done. Diabetes is associated with an increased risk of several severe viral respiratory tract infections, including H1N1, given that elevated glucose levels also suppress antiviral responses. So did you hear that? When you have high blood sugar, that's going to suppress anything that would fight the virus. And so if your goal is to fight the virus even when it hits, I think you want your immune virus response to kick in. And the best way to do that is to lower glucose levels. In China, there was a study on more than 500 subjects hospitalized with SARS-CoV-2 revealed that high fasting glucose levels determined the increased rates of death. So the people that died had higher blood sugar. The moral of this story is get your blood sugar down. Moreover, high glucose plasma levels and diabetes were independent predictors of mortality in patients with SARS. And during the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, diabetes was shown to increase the severity of the infection. In accordance, influenza and MERS in diabetic mice showed an increased illness gravity. In a study conducted on 5,700 patients affected by 9-1 DIVOC and hospitalized in New York City, diabetic patients were more likely to have received invasive medical ventilation compared with those who did not have diabetes, suggesting that individuals with diabetes may display impaired alveolar function. Importantly, in diabetic animal models, structural changes in the lungs were observed, such as collapsed epithelium in the alveolar and elevated vascular permeability. Moreover, endothelium, capillary basal lamina, and alveolar epithelium are thicker in those who have diabetes compared to non-diabetes. Notably, a recent work by various researchers showed that hypoglycemia at admission to the hospital was the best predictor of radiographic imaging of acute respiratory distress syndrome, independently of the medical history of diabetes. Acute hyperglycemia may lead to an abnormally inflammatory and immune response, contributing to the development and progression of the radiographic findings of ARDS in patients who have 9-1 DIVOC. In other words, I hope this is making a convincing argument that above everything else you can do right now to put your body in the best position to deal with 9-1 DIVOC, even when it hits, is to lower your blood sugar. This is why all the people that are randomly eating tons and tons and tons of junk food because they want to feel better, because you're under stress. We're all under stress. Deal with the stress in a non-food way. Meditation, deep breathing, listening to music, watching a comedy, something to take your mind off of the stress in your life. Get that blood sugar down, which, by the way, that stress alone is increasing your blood sugar. Then you're eating crappy garbage, which is increasing your blood sugar. All of those things are doing you no good. In addition, structure function studies suggest that the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 is highly glycosylated, and it has been hypothesized that high concentration of glycosylated SARS-CoV-2 viral particles and glycosylated ACE2 in the lung epithelium due to this hyperglycemia may influence your susceptibility to the infection and its subsequent severity. Yet another reason, keep the blood sugar down. As a matter of fact, higher glucose plasma levels can increase glucose concentration in the airway secretions and pulmonary epithelial cells. Exposure to high glucose concentration is known to enhance influenza viral infections and replication. Guys, if there ever was an argument that we should all be at least trying to focus on lowering blood sugar, and we know one of the best ways to do that is lowering your carbohydrates and getting into a state of ketosis. If ever there was a time in all of human history for us to put a focus on doing that, right now is that time. A recent report provided evidence that elevated glucose levels are strictly involved in viral replication. Interestingly, SARS-CoV-2 infection increases what's called mitochondrial ROS production, which induces stabilization of hypoxia-inducible factor 1A. 1 alpha, This in turn shifts the metabolic features of monocytes and macrophages into highly glycolytic, leading to an exaggerated replication rate of SARS-CoV-2. In keeping with this, a recent study in vitro showed that pharmacological inhibition of glycolysis reduced SARS-CoV-2 viral replication in human colon epithelial carcinoma cell lines. Therefore, a reduction of aerobic glycolysis could be important as a metabolic therapy aimed at controlling viral replication. That's the key. We don't want a bunch of extra votes showing up in the body that don't need to be there, that weren't actually at the ballot box on election day. We don't want that to happen. So you want to keep that replication from taking place. And yes, that was a jab at what's going on culturally right now. For all these reasons, hyperglycemia and high glycemic variability should be adequately prevented in order to improve the outcomes of 9-1 DIVOC patients. It is hence clear that well-controlled blood glucose levels will correlate with a lower risk of infection and or better disease resolution. In consideration of potentially adverse effects of commonly used drugs for type 2 diabetes and its comorbidities, a nutritional approach lowering blood glucose concentration should be the first option in order to prevent or reduce SARS-CoV-2 infection risk and related complications. So that's blood sugar. They went over all the reasons why blood sugar being elevated is a bad thing. They're trying to make the case it's high blood sugar. Next up, they're going to look at inflammation, our mutual friend, which may become harmful in excess. They're trying to say high blood sugar, high inflammation. Do we have a nutritional approach that can help with these things? And that's where the ketogenic diet comes into play. I don't want to go on and on and on and on about this because I think you guys get the picture of what we're saying here. Let me go on to the inflammation, see if there's anything here. It's well known, SARS-CoV-2, the cytokine with 9-1 DIVOC, severe progression leads to increased inflammation. Obesity helps, already has a low-grade chronic inflammation, so then SARS hits. I'm trying to see if there's anything here. Basically, what they're saying is if you already have a low level of inflammation because you're metabolically unhealthy, then when this inflammatory cytokine cascade hits the body, when 9-1 DIVOC hits, you're already inflamed. And so you're already on fire. It's just putting gasoline on that fire. So that's what the inflammation part was about. All right, let's get to ketogenic diet as lifestyle behavior approach against 9-1 DIVOC. Amongst the lifestyle behaviors, it is surprising that nutritional advice is still poorly considered when it comes to public health discussions about the prevention or reduction of SARS-CoV-2 infection and the related complications. Poorly considered? I would say it's not been considered at all. Quick poll. Anybody during this entire so-called pandemic, have you heard anyone from on high talking about nutrition? Anyone? Dr. Fauci, anyone? I haven't, and I've been looking for them to say something, anything about diet and how it can help. And it makes you wonder why. If this is a serious worldwide global pandemic, why haven't we heard anything about the nutritional impact that could be made? Not a single word. Yeah, Debbie said, not anyone. Nobody. And you've got to ask yourself why. A call of action is needed in order to promote proper nutritional strategies that could improve immune response and the potential clinical outcomes towards 9-1 DIVOC. No. We could put it out there. You know what? We think we need to lower inflammation. We need to boost your immunity. And we think that the way to do that is to eat real food, push the carbohydrates down, You know what would happen if we did that? If all of us in mass did that? We would be fact checked. We would be the blur out of our image that we use on our post, or it would get deleted and maybe you banned from the social media. Oh, you can't make claims about helping with SARS-CoV-2. I remember YouTube, the president of YouTube, went very proudly on CNN and talked about how they were going to censor anybody talking about 9-1 DIVOC. Oh, well, if you get on there and say, vitamin C cures 9-1 DIVOC, we're going to ban you. It's like, okay, but nobody's saying that. All they're saying is that it is a great way to boost your immunity, lower your inflammation. These are the things, but they don't want, it's almost like there's people hesitant to share because they don't want to be censored, but that's what's happening. Recently, Solomon and others proposed a combination of intermittent fasting along with supplementation with MCTs as a potential prophylactic strategy or an adjuvant therapy to tackle this infection by means of a change in the host metabolic state from a carbohydrate-dependent glycolytic to a fat-dependent ketogenic state aimed to alter viral replication. What a great idea. Intermittent fasting, MCTs, a carbohydrate-restricted diet which induces ketones, all of those things would do nothing but good things. Are you allowed to say that? See, this is the problem. It's what I was talking about in Jimmy Ranch yesterday. We have good science and good scientists out there trying to get the word out and questioning things that are being told to us about 9-1 DIVOC. But when you mention these kinds of things, they tend to come after you. Such metabolic shift caused an increased resistance to mitochondrial stress, an improvement in antioxidant defenses, an augmented form of autophagy and DNA repair, and a decreased insulin secretion. All good things, you guys. In this context, ketogenic diets represent a nutritional approach with an intriguing theoretical base for improving the immunological response to SARS-CoV-2 infection in those at very high risk. So if you know somebody in your life that got obesity, that got diabetes, that got heart disease, they've got any kind of thing that's keeping them locked up in their house out of fear of this thing, are you talking to them about a ketogenic diet? Are you giving them information that could be helpful? Because if you're not, you might be their lifeline because they're eventually going to get this. You don't run away from a virus. Eventually the virus is going to get us all. And so why not help those people most at risk right now? All right, so they go into what ketogenic diets are. I wrote many books about ketogenic diets. I've talked to you guys very extensively about it. You know what they do. You know how they improve metabolic health, improve insulin resistance. So let's get past what ketogenic are. Let's get right to the potential preventative effects of ketogenic diet on this specific 9-1 DIVOC infection. Let's look first at the innate cell-mediated immunity. Innate immune cells are firstly triggered by viral antigens through the activation of pattern recognition receptors, PRRs, in order to inhibit viral replication and modulate the adaptive immunity. In this context, the NLRP3 inflammasome is an important innate immunity sensor mediating virus-induced inflammation through the induction of interleukin-1 beta and interleukin 18 secretion. The pattern recognition receptor NLRP3 is a nucleotide oligomerization domain-like receptor NLR that recognizes both damage-associated molecular patterns such as toxins, ATP, excessive glucose, cholesterol crystals, pathogenic associated molecular patterns such as viral and bacterial molecules. For instance, RNA viruses can activate NLRP3 through mitochondrial antiviral signaling on the mitochondrial outer brain. It's getting a little bit nerdy. Stick with it just a bit here. Activated NLRP3 promotes the formation of the inflammasome complex interacting with the adapter protein, which in turn triggers the activation of a whole bunch of gobbledygook I don't want to bore you with. But let's just say it does a lot of good things in this innate cell-mediated immunity when you switch over to a ketogenic diet. And there's the process, by the way, if you want to take a look at what it looks like from the paper itself. And I'll show my Facebook fans and then over to YouTube so you guys can see it as well. All right. So the NLRP3 inflammasome activation due to a viral infection has been documented for influenza A virus and several others, hepatitis C, SARS-CoV, and seems to be mediated also by viral proteins. All right, let me skip down a little bit because we're getting a little bit caught in the weeds with that. All right, here we go. There is growing evidence that beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is that ketone body in the blood, inhibits NLRP3 inflammasome activation. The favorable effects of the ketogenic diet on inflammatory cytokines in humans, in animals, and cellular models are very well established. In other words, we know that we can lower inflammation with the presence of beta-hydroxybutyrate. Beta-hydroxybutyrate is able to act on a central common signaling pathway specific to this NLRP3 inflammasome in response to many different pro-inflammatory stimuli. More specifically, beta-hydroxybutyrate inhibits NLRP3 inflammasome activation through the reduction of this thing called K efflux from macrophages and the inhibition of inflammasome assembly. Consistent with these observations, beta-hydroxybutyrate dependent inhibition of IL-1 beta and IL-18 secretion in human monocytes has been documented. All of that to say, we know it lowers inflammation, right? And so very well established in the data and previous literature. In consideration of the role of inflammasome activation in triggering the systemic inflammatory cascade observed in 9-1-DIVOC patients, approaches based on increasing blood ketone levels, the beta-hydroxybutyrate, such as using ketogenic diets, such as using fasting, such as using MCT, should be taken into account to prevent the development or the progression of the cytokine storm syndrome. Sidebar. I think that this could be a good use for those who have very severe metabolic disease. This could be an argument for exogenous ketones or ketone esters for people as a prophylactic that are in the high risk category. So take high dose vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and exogenous ketones. I think this could be a good reason why those people should take it. Now, we know, and I've talked about it many times before, that exogenous ketones are very temporary. So I think maybe for those people, it's something they would do on a regular basis. I'm just spitballing it here that it seems to me that if the presence of beta-hydroxybutyrate in the blood is giving them these benefits, then what's the harm if they're able to tolerate the beta-hydroxybutyrate in exogenous ketone form or through the ketone esters? The ketone esters last a little bit longer, so maybe ketone esters would be more effective. I don't know. It'd be worth looking at for those high-risk populations. Interestingly, a recent hypothesis paper underlined the importance of a drastic reduction of glucose oral supply in order to reduce macrophage M1 polarization in the early stages of inflammation. In fact, this phenotype for M1, whose activation is linked to the cytokine storm syndrome, is strictly dependent upon aerobic glycolysis, which is known to be reduced by a drastic reduction in glucose uptake as it occurs in the midst of eating a ketogenic diet. On the other hand, ketogenic diets could sustain the metabolism of anti-inflammatory M2 macrophages, which abundantly express in various enzymes through the continuous supply of free fatty acids. So that is the innate cell-mediated immunity. Now let's move on to what's called the adaptive cell-mediated immunity. T lymphocytes recognize specific ligands by T cell receptors, which are specialized in antigen recognition. In most species, the vast majority of T cells is composed by alpha and beta chain, and a minor T cell production population expresses a TCR characterization, and it's getting a little bit gobbledygook again. Let me see. The main thing in this section is a boost in your T cells happens when you consume a ketogenic diet. And remember, a lot of people that are the so-called asymptomatic of 9-1-DIVOC, I think they're asymptomatic, and I said as much on the Jimmy Rants earlier in the year. I think they're asymptomatic because their T cells took care of the thing early. And so part of that is because their blood sugar's down, because their inflammation's down from good eating, and a ketogenic diet definitely can help with that. All right, so let's get to the conclusions, and I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. There are multiple mechanisms through which ketone bodies might impact severe viral infections, such as 9,1-DIVOC. A recent review article exhaustively summarizes this concept, proposing the administration of exogenous ketones, so there's my proposal, to critical patients in order to target respiratory viruses complications as a possible therapy. So yeah, if they get this thing, most certainly get exogenous ketones into these people. Because of just the presence of ketone bodies in the blood can do that, why would they not do that? We believe that the ketogenic diet induced increase in endogenous ketone bodies, endogenous meaning what your body makes on its own, could represent a much more valuable strategy in the prevention of this infection and adverse outcomes in obese patients. Well, it's more valuable because it's long lasting, because it's there all the time. 9,1-DIVOC, DBAS, go backwards. What does it spell? 9,1-DIVOC, look at it backwards. I knew that was going to happen. I start doing 9,1-DIVOC, and then people come in late and they're like, well, it's 9,1-DIVOC. Well, read it backwards, and that's what it is. And then you go, oh, you're welcome. But yeah, the endogenous ones tend to last longer. And it says, oh, now I get it. Yes. I'm trying to keep this from being removed from YouTube when it goes up on YouTube. So 9,1-DIVOC does the job. But endogenous does last a lot longer than the exogenous ketones. Indeed, we need to be looking at prevention and or correction of all risk conditions associated with serious 9,1-DIVOC disease, things like obesity, hyperglycemia, high glycemic variability, insulin resistance, and hypertension. All of that is mandatory in consideration of new waves of infections. Like I said earlier, we're on the 12th second wave now, in the absence of any effective pharmacological therapies and the V word. So we do have the V word on the way. We do have good therapies out there, but there's certainly nothing wrong with using a ketogenic diet in conjunction with that. This could be obtained with a nutritional strategy aimed to induce fat mass loss, to reduce chronic inflammation, hepatic and systemic insulin resistance, and to improve nutritional status, cardiovascular health, immune response, glucose homeostasis, and blood pressure control. All of those things come when you eat a ketogenic diet. Finally, the adoption of a well-structured and personalized ketogenic diet regimen could help a progressive nutritional education and rehabilitation in those with obesity, providing them an effective tool to modify lifestyle behavior, supporting a long-term control of body weight, and favoring a reduction in all the associated risk factors for potentially severe complications related to SARS-CoV-2 infection. Well-designed multi-centric studies on the actual incidence of severe 9,1-DIVOC disease among obese patients who followed a structured protocol of ketogenic diet could be helpful to confirm this hypothesis. During this difficult pandemic era, the adoption of lifestyle preventative measures is mandatory and should be carefully implemented. Oh my gosh. Italy, you guys, that's where this study came from. Again, if you joined us late, I'm reading from the Journal of Translational Medicine. The name of the study, The Dark Side of the Spoon, Glucose, Ketones, and 9,1-DIVOC. Just reverse that backwards, and that's what we're talking about. A possible role for ketogenic diet. Antonio Paoli, Stefania Guarini, and Massimiliano Caprio. Sorry, I just slaughtered his name, I'm sure. But these researchers, good job. And thank you again to the Fat Fuel Girl, Janae. She sent me or talked about this on her website, on her Instagram page. And I'm like, oh, that is so good. I need to talk about that on Jimmy Rant. So today we did. Do you feel more confident in your ketogenic approach now, knowing that it's putting you in a good spot at dealing with 9,1-DIVOC? I would hope so. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. We're going to come here first to Instagram. then over to Facebook, finally over to YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website for all the past episodes. And by the way, we have a brand new Instagram page we are going live from. So if you watch this in other places or you watch this on the replay somewhere, if you want to watch this live, where it originates and who I talk to and stare at the most in camera is right here on my Instagram page. It's at Jimmy Rants over on Instagram. Go follow. I think I'm almost at 450 followers. Just kind of threw it out there with the brand new page. So I'd love to see all the Jimmy Rants fans, my posse right here on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page. So come follow me over here on Instagram. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. I love living life based off fueled by ketones, says Becky. Yes. And especially now that you have all of these benefits that we talked about in this study, it's pretty amazing. Holly says we're watching DVDs during this time. Got a great documentary on WW. Is that World War II? I thought you said on WW. I was like, you're watching a documentary on Weight Watchers? What? But yes, World War II. That's awesome. Becky says she loves her Oura Ring. Yeah, I love mine too. I tried to get them to be a sponsor, but I guess they got the big head now. They don't need little Jimmy Moore to promote them. Becky says it'll be a cold day and you know where, HE double hockey sticks before they tell us about lifestyle. You're right. You're right. Thanks for the information, says Adam, and motivation. You're welcome, man. That's what I try to do here. Yes, 9-1 DIVOC. If you came in late, switch it backwards. I'm trying to prevent the fact checkers from putting a label on this video. So we'll see how successful what that was, calling this 9-1 DIVOC. And I have to give credit to Ryan Lowry, who put that out there. Every time he does one on 9-1 DIVOC, he always just calls it DIVOC. I remember the first time I looked at it, I was like, what is DIVOC? Oh, so then I thought I'd do my own little spin. So 9-1 DIVOC, that's how I'm handling it. For defeating DIVOC virus, breathing some kind of oil is the solution. What is Daphne oil? I've never heard of Daphne oil. Interesting. Southern Clean Living, great show. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you, Instagram. Let me pop over here now to my Facebook page, which, by the way, you guys can't see it because you're just looking at me on the camera, but I have a new setup. I went to Walmart yesterday and I bought a desk, which has my iPad on a little stand here, my laptop for the YouTube feed, which, by the way, YouTube, I don't know if you can notice it or not, but I have a Blue Yeti microphone plugged in and it's right there. So it should be picking me up really good. The sound quality should be amazing. Please notice it if you haven't, because I put a lot of hard work into making this setup as good as possible. And then, of course, my Instagram page, what I did is I made it more centered. So usually I've had you off to the side. I got you more centered today. And I hope, again, it helps me to be able to just look straight forward at you guys. But let's turn our attention over here to my Facebook page. What's up, Facebook? See what you guys have to say. Mindy says, haven't seen you in a while. Your face looks thinner. Thank you for that. Yeah, I've been gone, by the way, the last 5 weeks. I just need to get away for a little bit. So I did come back early. I was planning on coming back January 4th, I believe was the Monday I was going to come back, but I was itching to talk to you guys. I've quite frankly missed you, and so I wanted to come back. Brian likes 9-1 DIVOC. You're welcome, Brian. Glad to entertain you today. Marcella says, I've been keto for 15 years. Well, you should be good. What's up, Brother Steve? Thanks for being here. Brian says you should refer to it as ENIUQ. I'm just not going to say all that. Good luck pronouncing that one. All right, I'm gonna take a stat. Oh, it's hydroxychloroquine backwards. I was like, what is he doing? Brian, you are as bad as me, dude, and that's bad. That's real, real bad. It's all about locking up and locking down and masking up, says Debbie. Well, they can try. I think people are tired of it, and the rebellion is already happening. I was in Facebook jail for the entire Thanksgiving weekend. What did you do, Debbie? Lots of money to be made by pharmaceutical companies, says Patty. That's why they're not pushing therapeutics. They're not pushing vitamins and sunshine and real food. You're right. That's a big reason. Thank you, Tanja. She says you sound great. Well, I did nothing new to the Facebook page. The only thing is that you might be a little bit closer because I've got this desk that this is on. So maybe because it's closer and I project when I talk. And so I don't know why, but the sound shouldn't be different for you guys. Kathy says, struggling to get back on and staying on after my husband's death in August. I'm so sorry to hear of your loss. Definitely grief and let yourself grieve and don't feel bad about grieving. Grieving the loss of a very close loved one, in this case, your husband. Don't rush getting back into anything. If you need to just chill and, that you're never going to get over that. And so just give yourself more time and grace and self-love. You're going to get past that. I shared your live using 9-1 DIVOC. Go girl. To defeat DIVOC virus, breathing Daphne oil is the solution. Yeah, you said that, I think, over here as well. So thank you for that, Turgay. All right, thank you, Facebook. Let me pop over here now to my all-new YouTube channel. Hope you guys love the sound. You love the audio. But the only thing is you see my Instagram feed right here. So you can see the phone, the iPhone 11 that I use to record the Instagram feed. So that's the only thing. I really can't do much about that because of this setup. That's really, I guess I can move you over to get it out of screen, but no, I'm not going to have it teetering on the edge of the desk. You just got to know that's the main feed and that's what we're going to focus on. But hopefully you do like the sound of it. What a treat. I didn't think we'd see you until after Christmas. Yes, Carrie, I came back full-time starting yesterday. I missed you guys. I found that I was needing an outlet. And so this is what I like to do. It's what I'm good at. And so why put off the misery of coming back till January 4th? But yes, you're right. I was originally going to be gone until January, but I couldn't take it anymore. Walker 1 says, my president says churches are essential. Yeah. Why haven't you turned on super chats on YouTube? Well, that's a good question. I just started doing these live streams from my computer, and I see there's all kinds of interesting little gizmos and gadgets, Walker. So bear with me. I will probably optimize that at some point. Today, you got better sound quality, so enjoy that for now. Inevitable exposure to all, says Craig. Lack of talk of boosting your immune system, the two biggest travesties of this whole mess. But then again, keto doesn't make money like selling masks or producing the V word does. Exactly. Walker says, I lost 50 pounds after reading Keto Clarity. Well, thank you, man. That book has been a huge blessing in my life for many years now. Joe says there's much money to be made with 9-1 DIVOC, but none with keto. Well, if they sell steaks, I guess they could make money with keto. I had it. It wasn't even like the worst cold I've ever had. I attribute it to my vitamin D and low carb. Good job. Good job. All right. Wow, this Turgay guy is on all three formats. He left the exact same thing about the Daphne oil on all three of my formats. Turgay, you win the I Love Jimmy Rants award today because you were on all three of my formats here today. That's hilarious. Southern Clean Living, how long do you think the government is going to keep talking about this? When will this all be over? I'm so ready. Well, that's an interesting question. If a certain person had gotten reelected, I think it would have dropped at that point. The fact that this is still in limbo, there are, unfortunately, powers that be, and this is just my jaded position, but there are powers that be that would love nothing more than to keep this going indefinitely, so that they can keep, using their will over us. Somebody convince me otherwise. Convince me why Gavin Newsom can lock down California for 3 weeks in the midst of the Christmas holiday season. Somebody convince me what's happening in Michigan. Somebody convince me what's happening in New York City, where on one block, business owner wants to open his business, but he has to shut down. But one block over, everything's open and everything's fine. Does the virus know which business? Like, it's so bizarre right now. And that doesn't even get into like how many of these deaths are actually attributed to this thing that has not been isolated in a lab. Let's face it, 9-1 DIVOC has not been isolated in a lab. So we have no idea when we're testing if it's for 9-1 DIVOC or any number of coronaviruses. And then we're going to give people a V word for 9-1 DIVOC when we haven't even isolated it in a lab. Yeah, there's a lot of questions about this. And so how much longer this is going to last is really up to when people realize that maybe this isn't what we thought it was, So, all right, guys, that's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. You can see all the past episodes there. We do originate live right here on Instagram. Go follow me over there, Jimmy Rants. Just look up Jimmy Rants, all one word, and you will find the show. We do go live Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. So be here when the clock strikes 11 a.m. Eastern. So thanks for being here. We also have the replay available for you right here on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page on IGTV. So as soon as this is over, we will get that right up onto IGTV. We also put the replay over on YouTube. Type in a keyword Jimmy Rants. You'll find the show over on YouTube. And then again, JimmyRants.com, all the past episodes. So what do we have for you tomorrow? I got another study for you tomorrow. Today we had a really good study looking at the ketogenic diet with 9-1 DIVOC. Tomorrow, guys, I have been dying to do this. This study came out the week after I left. And so this study came out, and I was dying to come back and do a rant on this study. I've seen Dr. Ben Bickman talk about this study. I've seen a couple other people give their thoughts about it. But hang on, because Jimmy Moore is about to give you his thoughts on 1 egg a day increases the risk of developing diabetes by 60%. It's an actual study that got published, and I'm going to tell you all the reasons why it's full of bull. It's so full of bull. But you'll have to come back tomorrow, Wednesday's edition of Jimmy Rants, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We will see you then. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Going to download that real quick. What's up, Mandy? Mandy, you came in real late, girl. So we had a great episode all about the ketogenic diet and its use with this virus that's out there. Very interesting study that I read. So go back and watch the replay if you get a chance. But thank you for being here. South Dakota has 3.6 unemployment rate. California, 9.3. Walker, that 9.3 in California, I think is going to get far, far worse with the lockdown that they're currently in the midst of. If I lived in California, I would be looking at any possible way to get out of there as soon as possible. I know a lot of people, almost 4 million people left New York City. 400,000 left New York City, not 4 million, sorry. 400,000 people left New York City. That was huge. And a lot of those businesses have now boarded up there. Poor people are losing their entire livelihoods. Debbie says, awesome live. Well, thank you. I do enjoy this. I think I've been like pent up energy to do Jimmy Rants. And so now that I'm back, we just let her rip. But thank you guys for hanging with me today. I'm going to get out of here for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. And bye, guys. What up? What up? I do want to see you guys. Hang on a second. I do want to see. Do you notice the difference in the sound? Because I'm looking over on my levels over here. I have a Blue Yeti microphone literally right there. It's about maybe 2 feet from my mouth. Can you hear me okay from where it's positioned? Because I do want to try to maximize the sound for you guys. It does look like the video feed is pretty good as well. It's a couple years old, 2-3 years old MacBook Air, so I wasn't sure how the video was going to look, but I would love your feedback if you could tell me if it sounds good. I know somebody said earlier, yeah, Greener Pasture says it sounds good. Does it sound better than it usually does? Because usually I use the internal microphone in the computer, but I did actually plug in a Blue Yeti because I wanted to see if it would improve the sound. I'm always looking to optimize all of these things for you guys, so it's a good experience when you watch. You still gotta deal with my ugly mug, but I can't do much about that. We haven't gotten back our freedoms from 9/11. Well, that's a whole nother story, Shirley. So, all right, guys, let me pop off of here for now. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.